I just wanted to give you a brief word about the Shirley Democratic Town Committee. All of our meetings are, well, you know, the public is always invited. We don't have a next meeting scheduled, but if you'd like to get on our email list, you may email us at shirleydtc@yahoo.com and just let us know that you would like to get notices about upcoming events. We're also on social media at DTC Shirley, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we also do have a website. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce each person who's participating in this Shirley Community Roundtable. We're calling it Generation Z Edition because we are very fortunate to have two teenage co-moderators tonight, and I will be introducing them as well. When I say your name, if you could unmute yourself, or actually just maybe, yeah, if you can unmute yourself and say hello after I say your name, then the camera will be on you for a moment. So for people that are watching on cable, they'll be able to associate your face to your name. So the first person I would love to introduce is Bill Oelfke. Hi, Bill. He was born and raised in Ayer. Thank you. He's lived in Shirley for the last 14 years. Bill has served on numerous boards and committees. He's been on the finance committee, the personnel boards, the planning boards in both Ayer and Shirley over the past 40 years. Bill is our Shirley Town Clerk, and he's also the vice chair of the Shirley Planning Board, and that is the hat that he's wearing tonight. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Bryan Sawyer.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bryan. Thank you for coming. Bryan is a lifelong resident of Shirley. He's been serving as a member of the Board of Selectmen for the past 3 years. He served on the Finance Committee for 5 years. And additionally, Bryan is the general manager of the Bull Run Restaurant, which is currently celebrating its 75th year of family ownership this May. Is that right, Bryan?
That's correct. So we're pretty excited. So
it's a big year for the Bull Run.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I'd like to introduce Joyce Reischutz. Joyce is the current chair of the Ayer Shirley Regional School Committee. She's previously been on the Shirley School Committee for 9 years. She was instrumental in getting the middle school built. She's been a member of the negotiating team for the teachers union. Joyce was also a member of the building committee and chair of the sustainability working group. And Joyce is also a big champion of our Shirley Scouts.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's a lovely day in the neighborhood.
It's been a beautiful day. And our other school committee member is Michele Granger. Hi, Michele.
Hi.
Michelle's been on the school committee since being elected to a 3-year term in 2011. She's an active member of the Ayer Shirley Education Foundation. She was a former member of the Page Hilltop PTO. She served as a parent on the Regional Strategic Planning Committee, served on the contract negotiating team. Michele has represented the committee at the Devon's Educational Advisory Council as well. And now for the moderators for tonight. We have our Shirley Democratic Town Committee Vice Chair and tonight's moderator, Bryan Goldberg. Hi, Bryan.
Hello.
He's the Assistant Director of the MIT Office of Sustainability, where he works to help advance projects in climate, stormwater, land, and waste management. Bryan is also a member of the Shirley Greenways Committee. And we are fortunate to have this evening 2 youth co-moderators. One of them is Justin Cullinan. Hi, Justin.
Hi.
Justin's a sophomore at Ayer Shirley Regional High School. He's an actor. He's also co-founder of Teens for Change of Ayer and Shirley, which in his words is dedicated to local community changes that will in turn spread out into the rest of the country and the world. And with him is another co-founder of Teens for Change, Denim Murphy. Hi, Denim.
Hi.
Denim's a sophomore at St. Bernard's High School. And with that, I want to turn things over to Bryan Goldberg. Bryan is the one who first conceived of this whole idea of having forums like this so that we could learn about the importance of local civic engagement and civic leadership. And I would like to hand it over to Bryan.
Great, thanks, Dina, and thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, it's a pretty simple concept. I moved to town about 3 years ago, and moving into Shirley from outside of Shirley, it's hard to know who is doing things in Shirley and how does one learn about who's doing what and how to get involved. And it's what's so wonderful about Shirley is it seems like the way one learns is by talking to other people who are doing things. And so I didn't know, how do I find those people? Who leads our town and how do we meet those people? So once I met Dina, I thought, well, why don't we try this? And we did an event like this in the fall where we celebrate the very volunteers, our guests here tonight, who are the ones who are volunteering their time. They are choosing to spend their time leading our town and our school committee, dealing with all the challenging issues. So let's have a chance like this outside of a formal public meeting to just meet these folks, understand why do they choose to spend their time volunteering on these committees that help to lead our tiny town, and also learn about what are some of the key issues that as residents of Shirley and people who care about Shirley that we should know about that may be coming down the pipe from the respective committees of some of these folks. And then the key piece, as Dina introduced my co-moderators, is having younger voices involved in the process. And it's a chance tonight for us to hear some questions from Denim and Justin from a kind of a younger person's perspective of what's on their minds and how does the issues that matter to some young people in town, how does that relate to what maybe some of our town boards and committees might be able to do, in some cases not be able to do anything, but what and how can the local government and our local boards and committees perhaps raise some issues of importance that are coming from our youth. So we thought injecting the kind of a youth perspective might bring up some interesting ideas tonight that we could follow forth with. So that's really the context. Enough talk from me, and why don't we get into it? The structure we proposed is that we have Bryan and Bill who are representing two town committees, and so we'd sort of take Bryan and Bill as a package because there are some issues that they can speak to together. So we'll spend the first 20 minutes getting to know a little bit more about Bryan and Bill and the issues that are on their minds as leaders of the town. And then we'll spend the second 20 minutes getting to know Michele and Joyce, learning more about kind of their motivations and what some of the interests are from the school committee. And then at the end, we'll open it up for some questions. Really, the aim is to kind of wrap this up in an hour. If people want to chat a little more, we can go with that. But my job will try to keep us on time. So for Bryan and Bill, maybe we'll take this first question together, and Bryan, we'll start off with you as our kind of representative from the Town Select Board. Bryan, I know we talked about this on the phone and we kind of laughed about it. I mean, you choose to spend your time as a volunteer, and there's some challenging issues that you face. Of all the wonderful things that Bull Run is doing as a business, why do you choose to spend some of that precious time volunteering to help lead this town?
I mean, I think like many of the volunteers, I'm completely vested in this town. I think, it'd been mentioned that I've been a lifelong resident. I have a fair amount of family that all resides in Shirley. They attend the school system. Obviously my family's business is in town. And, I find the most effective way to have a direct impact, believe it or not, I think is local government. I mean, I think there's many people that, obviously a lot can impact your life on the state and federal level. But if we're talking what's going to impact your school system, what's going to impact, whether it's your grandparents with the Council on Aging, what's going to impact the services you have of fire and, police, those are things that you can affect directly. And so that's why, I think it's worthwhile to get involved.
Thanks, Bryan. Bill, what about you? Boy, you have quite a resume of local involvement across both towns, and you also have a day job as the town clerk, and yet that's not enough. So nope. Why is it that you are so committed to volunteering to lead a challenging, board with some challenging issues in the planning board?
Well, for a long time, I've been, like you said, I've been doing this for a long time. And what started me off, I was younger and I started getting involved in town meetings. When I was 18 years old, I went to town meetings in the town of Ayer, and that got me excited about town issues. And then as I moved up and just went to some selectmen's meetings, and I had one of the selectmen in Ayer, because I used to be one, I'd go out and say to them, why do we have to do it that way? Why do we do it that way? Why can't we do this? And one of the selectmen in Ayer came to me and said, why don't you do this? And I went, ooh, good point. Yeah. So I do it because the town needs me, and town needs all of us volunteers. And because we have all of us have limited funds, Ayer, Shirley, all the towns, and you just can't buy a person to work there for every little thing we need done. So there's someone said, you know, somebody should do X, Y, Z. Well, I figured out maybe I should be the one who does X, Y, Z. So that's why I started volunteering, and I was on the finance committee, personnel board, and the planning board in Ayer. Then when I moved to Shirley, I started getting on the personnel board there, because my career prior to being town clerk was personnel, and then got on planning board again in Shirley. So that's why I volunteer, because it's needed.
And Bill, and then Brian, will come back to you. Bill, in your years of volunteering, especially with the town and Shirley in this case, at the beginning, there were probably things you started to tackle, issues you started to tackle. Have you seen some of the changes that you had hoped or originally tackled? I mean, are you seeing success? Is it worth your time? I mean, it's wonderful that you do it. Are you actually seeing the things come to fruition that you've hoped to see happen?
Well, it's hard in the for big picture things to happen too quickly. And even though I've been involved for a long time, things take a long time to happen. So like on the planning board, which is what I'm here representing, not the town clerk, but as a planning board, a lot of things are specific issues, a site plan, a development, a special permit, and each meeting has its own issues that come up. Big picture items, as planning board, we want to also do some changes in bylaws to try and make it easier for certain things to happen. And I did see some good things come out of that. We did develop a marijuana use issue bylaw that allowed the marijuana the marijuana companies to come into town, decided where they could go, that type of thing. And we came up with a couple other bylaws, like these solar plants, solar fields, where they could go and develop different bylaws that we brought in front of town meeting. So we did have some good issues that have come up and that we've tackled as a team, the whole planning board. We've developed some subcommittees to help us. And so we are seeing some results of our efforts, which is a great thing.
Yeah, that reinforces the desire to keep doing it.
Right.
Thanks, Bill. Brian, what about you? You got involved, it sounds like 3 years ago, at least in this role. Are you seeing the changes you've hoped to see?
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's work to be done, as there always will be. But I definitely do think that we've made progress in some areas. I mean, I think, the first thing that I was mainly focused on, based on my background of being on the finance committee for years, was, I wanted to work towards being more financially stable. The town of Shirley, just like many small towns, has, a lot of issues as far as financing and funding, and we're limited with revenues. And I feel like we've definitely made significant progress. We've either attained or come close to attaining a lot of our financial goals, but not just on the financial aspect. I mean, there's certain things like addressing certain infrastructure that we've either began the process of doing or we have done. I mean, I know that, downtown, and you can see the newly paved, roads and ADA sidewalk and all of that. So there's always, things to be done, but I do think a lot's been accomplished. I mean, I think one of the biggest things was, it wasn't specifically why I got involved on the Board of Selectmen, but it was definitely an issue at the time of there was quite a bit of turmoil, whether it be on the board or different, whether it was the Board of Selectmen or different boards and committees. and I feel like a lot of that has calmed down. I think, you know, having, you know, being able to have healthy discussion and having much more of a relaxed atmosphere, whether it's on any board or committee, I think it invites people to want to volunteer, where if it's going to be hostile, it's not necessarily the case. And I think, you know, we've changed in that aspect. So.
Wonderful. It sounds welcoming. Thanks, Brian. I think I'll turn it over to Justin and Denim on a few minutes to pose, you know, one or two questions. First, we can take Bill and Brian as a package, and again for Bill and Brian, you know, as we've talked, there may be some things that isn't a role for the town, but you know, as youth asking some key questions, might there be any suggestions you can offer for how some of the issues that Justin and Denim might raise might be able to be addressed? Is there some way to guide them? So yeah, Justin and Denim, why don't we hand it over to you to put one or two questions on the table?
Okay, so me and Denim decided I'm going to do the questions for the town people, and then she's going to do the questions for the school committee. So hi,
okay.
I'm Justin. Just so you know, that's why I'm going to be talking for this, and Denim's going to be talking for the other part. So me and Denim were co-founders of Teens for Change. I think, as you all probably know, we had the march last year. And so our questions are kind of gathered around our whole topic of like anti-racism. So I have two questions. The first one is, what steps are being taken or planning to be taken to make our town community actively anti-racist?
Well, as planning board, and that's the role I'm in, we really don't have a role in that type of area, except for as citizens backing you up and being there for you, that type of thing. But planning board in itself, we wouldn't really get involved in that.
So from the Board of Selectmen, I mean, it's a challenge, and it can be frustrating because, you know, I know, for instance, one scenario is there's been a group of demonstrators that have been demonstrating on, you know, near the post office, and there's some, you know, stickers, you know, that I don't feel in any way represents, you know, Shirley or the overwhelming majority of residents that live here. I think the biggest thing would be through, you know, education and awareness. You know, there's certain challenges, as frustrating as they may be, from a legal or a, you know, town standpoint, you know, based on freedom of speech, even though it's uncomfortable in the sense of it's nothing that, you know, I agree with or anybody else. You know, I believe on my board, obviously I can't speak directly for them. But I think just, you know, helping, making people aware that that's not, you know, what we believe in, and that's not, you know, something that we welcome in the town of Shirley. So.
Right. Okay, thank you. And then my next question is kind of tied to that one, I guess. How are elected officials in the town and people just in general in the town addressing the issues of racism in our town community, and how can we work to better get people to actively become anti-racist?
It's a lot of hard work, and it's I think just doing the organization like you're doing, Justin and Denim, trying to get everybody involved, and each committee, you know, like I said, planning board wouldn't get involved in that, and however, you know, getting involved with your nation, you know, state leaders, that type of thing, to get them involved, and have the rallies, like you said, as peaceful rallies. And that's the best thing I could say, and try to get the town's people that are on selectmen, planning board, all the different committees, and the well-known people in Shirley to be there with you. That always helps to have the visibility when others are there with you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think just continuing to do what you're doing, you know, I know it's not always as immediate, you know, of a result. But I just think, you know, over time, continuing to get out the message, you know, that's not, you know, really what Shirley represents. I think over time can help achieve the goals. So.
Awesome, thank you. Oh, Denim, go ahead.
sorry, I don't know how this works with the raising hand. But I did do some research, and Groton last year made a task force in their town. So I think it's definitely possible. I think that me and Justin being 16 years old and figuring out a march in only a couple weeks, I think it's definitely possible. I honestly don't like know your position in the town, like how hard it is, but I know that it's definitely needed and it definitely can get done. But it may take some time and some hard work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if you know, making suggestions like, you know, like on this forum is helpful. You know, it's a form of us as elected officials getting feedback and seeing what we can do and whether something is feasible, you know, similar to what other towns have been doing. Or maybe if it's, you know, if that particular scenario might not work for Shirley, we can do something similar that achieves the same result.
Yeah, that brings up another, Brian, no, go, because I think what I'm going to say is what you were just going to say, so go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to ask kind of from an expert like Brian, I mean, how might this idea, so, you know, Groton had a task force, how might an idea like that get acted upon, you know, and evaluated for Shirley? I mean, does the select board consider setting up a task force, or how might something like this get started in our town?
It would probably be, you know, if it was something, a direction the Board of Selectmen wanted to go in, it would probably be something where we would look to start some form of a subcommittee. The subcommittee would obviously be made up of residents and whether it's representatives of, you know, those that hold certain positions within the town, or, you know, just general residents. We try and get a mix of, you know, a group of people that would well represent, you know, the different aspects of Shirley. And a lot of that would be put to them of, you know, what, you know, how would you, you know, basically what would you look to accomplish and how would you look to accomplish that? And it would be reporting back to the Board of Selectmen, and if there were additional decisions that we would have to make. But it would basically be a subcommittee of residents of Shirley.
Yep,
Great. Another idea
totally
that
agree.
I think Brian brought up before, because me, Denim, and Brian have talked a few times before this, whatever. And I don't want to steal your question, but I remember you brought up something about a question of like the town putting out like an official statement about like what we stand for, and it's like how it's against racism. Like that's also another idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, it's definitely something we can consider. I can, you know, bring to my colleagues. And, you know, I think it's, you know, it's fairly safe to say that, you know, though I can't speak for my other two colleagues, you know, with working with them, I think they stand for the same beliefs that I do, and the same, you know, the same fact that they don't, you know, generally welcome, you know, any type of, you know, whether it's hate speech or what have you. And I don't think that has a place in Shirley. So yeah, I can definitely, you know, approach them.
Thank you so much.
Well, Justin and Denim, thanks for your questions, and Brian, just on this, following this one trail, thank you for some of the guidance. And I guess it's safe to say that Justin and Denim, if there's, it sounds like there's an open door, perhaps to advance, you know, some idea through the Board of Selectmen, and I guess you now know who some of those people are. In this case, Brian, you know, might be able to advise you further on how to advance this. And I can guarantee you're not going to be the only ones who would want to be involved and support that process.
Right.
So there's an opportunity right there. I just want to be respectful of the time. So Brian and Bill, any kind of final thoughts on some of the questions we put out here before we shift over to the school committee?
Well, I would like just to add that the importance of being volunteers for anybody who's listening, who's thinking about wanting to be a volunteer. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I got a lot of things on my plate. a lot of times the things that you can do to volunteer doesn't really take that long. You know, if you want to be on the finance committee, yeah, there's a time frame in there from March to April and May that's really, you know, hard. But even on other personnel boards and things like that, it's, you know, a couple hours each 2 or 3 weeks, you know, and a couple hours a month. So just needing your brain power, needing your thoughts, the diversity of ideas that come out of these volunteer committees. You know, you always think, what can little old me do? Well, I came from a personnel background. And when I started in Town of Ayer on the personnel board, they didn't even have a personnel manual to rate employees or do anything with their employees. So I wrote it. And it was like a, you know, 80-page document I wrote, and it's still in use right now. They've tweaked it a couple of times, but it was a starting point for people. And you find out what's needed in town, you have the expertise, you help out, and it's the way to be. That's the way to be.
The only thing I would say is, because I know, you know, when I was looking to get involved, it can seem daunting, and I was, you know, a little apprehensive at first, you know, because it's, you know, you don't know exactly whether it's on the planning board or the zoning board of appeals or board of selectmen or the finance committee. You know, you might not know exactly how a meeting's run. You might not know the proper etiquette. You might not have a lot of background. Some of them might be recorded, and you're concerned that, you know, you might you might say something that you know, that you're embarrassed about. But I just think if you start small, you know, join a committee, you know, learn, I think you'll find that it's actually, a lot of it is based on, you know, not only common sense, but, you know, if you're making a decision that's for the best interest of the town, it's most likely going to be well received, and you'll learn as you go. And it's really shouldn't be that daunting in the end. So.
Brian, I see Betty's hand is raised. Betty, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just unmuted myself. I'm Betty Ketty, and I'm a member of the Shirley Democratic Town Committee. And I wanted to let Justin and Denim know that although I live in Shirley, I go to church in Groton, because I lived in Groton before I lived in Shirley. And our church has a racial justice ministry. And every Sunday, they hold signs for Black Lives Matter in front of the church, and on the common in front of the church. And they're there every Sunday at 1. And if you went over, you would meet people there, like some Sunday at 1, and they would share ideas with you because they've had a lot of issues with racial problems in Groton, and they just being there on Sunday has attracted attention, and a lot of people like it. Most people like it that they're there, but there are those people that don't, and snide letters in the paper. So they also had an issue about the sign. There's these concrete signs or stones, granite signs. When you come in to any entrance, it says "All are welcome." They had a big issue over the word "all." Like, we don't really want to welcome all, some of the people said, but that one, they had a big town meeting. So they trying to do as much as possible in a very white town. Well, the demographics are really 95% white people in Groton, but they don't all feel that way. You know, they have a lot of heart, and they want to make a difference. And I think people from other towns go there and stand with them. And I think Dina has done something in this area with Black Lives Matter too. So, but the more people that gather and the more people that stand out, put a sign out in front of your house, that kind of thing, people notice that. And I think it's important, especially in these times where people are trying to take the votes away from people, you know, put in more obstruction to voting. It never ends. And so I've talked enough, but I just wanted to let you know that you have a lot of people care about that, and I'm one of them, so I'll shut up now.
Great. Thank you, Betty. I see we're ready to move on. Is that Rochelle, do you have, oh, gone. Okay, maybe she was in the wrong meeting. All right. Well, great. Well, we'll have some time at the end for questions and comments as well. So again, how about a little round of applause for Bryan and Bill? Thank you for joining us for this first portion. And again, thank you for your volunteer service. But we welcome you to stay on, because we're now going to shift to two other important volunteers in our community. As Dina noted, we have Michele and Joyce from the school committee. And what's key is that Michele is an Ayer resident on the school committee, and Joyce is a Shirley resident on the school committee. And so maybe there's a two-town perspective here, but the focus is schools. And we'll get right into it. So for Joyce and Michele, maybe we'll start with you, Joyce. Really similar question to Bryan and Bill. I mean, Joyce, you have a really busy bike business, and yet you have been so committed for decades to volunteering your time.
Please, you're making me older.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we'll say for a few minutes you've been dedicated to volunteering some time, and made quite an impact. But what keeps motivating you, given you've got a full life too?
If I could put that answer off for just a minute and give some kudos to Michele, who works on the Ayer Shirley Regional Educational Foundation, and has done quite a bit of that in addition to the school committee. It's a tremendous achievement that we have a group like that. 25 people or something, Michele? There's a large number of...
No, it's more like 12 people.
12? Last time I saw the list. And they raise quite a bit of money and give us some of the time, some of the nice extras that we have in school that would be hard to do with the school budget. So she does that, and she gets lots of, she should get lots of recognition for that.
Thank you, Joyce.
So why do any of us do this? When you raise your hand, and Bill can back me up on this, when you raise your hand and you swear on the school committee, you swear to support the interests of the school and the good of the school. And so it's a little different than your other town officials, according to the laws of the state, of course. So that is supposed to be your focus and what you're supporting and what you're doing. The number of kids, and you see stuff happening, a couple of us didn't see anything really horrible happening, but like Bryan said, there was some contention between the school committee at the time and the union, and it wasn't very pretty. And so I think that stimulated some of us to step forward and run for the office. I was on Shirley School Committee for 9 years, lost the election, but got the middle school built and the auditorium, which was very important. So then I walked away because you're quite right. I have other things to do and places to go. So, but then when the region came along, I figured, well, I've done contracts, I've hired superintendents, I've done many our rules and stuff that we operate by, and you really need to go to training to be on the school committee. I'm just like Bill had to get certification to be the town clerk. We have training that is strongly encouraged to be on the school committee, and I think that's very important for anyone who does it. I have been very fortunate that every school committee that I've been with, they've only had one focus, and that's for the good of the kids and the good of the school. We've never had anybody who's had another way of looking at things, and it's really the only way to be on some of these committees. So does that help?
Great, thanks, Joyce. And Michele, what about you? What's motivated you, and have you seen some of the changes that you had hoped, perhaps as part of your motivation?
Yeah, so I, as you guys mentioned in the introduction, I was, kind of the parent that volunteered at the school and painted the murals on the wall at Page Hilltop with a friend. And was involved in, you know, the PTO and in Ayer Shirley Education Foundation, and giving to the schools was important to me. Giving back to the kids was important to me. And then when I was approached to run for school committee, I was, you know, really apprehensive because I felt like that was going to be making tough decisions to take things away from the schools. You know, budgetary issues where you had to, you know, kind of not be able to give. You'd had to make hard decisions to take things away. And that's just not necessarily in my nature. I want to give everyone everything they need. But so I kind of, you know, had a hard time with making that decision. And then once I decided to join, it was really, you know, just to kind of get a pulse of what was going on in the school district. There was a time back in those days where people would say, I'm not sending my kid across the parking lot. So if we were at Page Hilltop, they had no intention of having their kid go on to middle school or high school over there. They were gonna, you know, choice their kids out. And we had a really big choice problem in our district where we were losing, you know, lots of students to other districts. And we do have a lot of high performing districts that surround us. I mean, just look at our borders and you can see there's lots of districts that score very well on standardized testing or rate very highly in rankings of public schools. So I wanted to really, you know, work on what's going on at Ayer Shirley. And I think we've really come a long way. You know, we've been recognized as one of World News Report, what is that magazine? Whatever the magazine is, we've been recognized, US News and World Report, as a top high school for several years now, making national rankings. We built a brand new high school. We're definitely not losing as many students to choice as we had been in years past. A lot of the families that used to choice their families were the families that were involved in the schools, and they'd get to a point where they just didn't see the future was going to be bright, so they'd pull their kids. And we definitely have retained a lot of those families, and those families fought for regionalization. They fought for the new high school building, and they're, you know, trying to do what's best for the kids in the schools at all times.
So glad you stepped up when you did. And maybe Michele, and then to Joyce, what, as you look out over the next, I don't know, year or two, are there kind of some key issues that are coming down that, you know, we all need to know about and perhaps advocate in some way for?
You mean you're gonna let us advertise? This is great.
So I was going to say, I don't know if you want the Ayer resident to advocate for the field project in Shirley, but
everyone has an independent view, but you
yeah.
know, what matters to you, you know?
So, well, you know, one of the major things we need to address in the upcoming weeks and months is the fact that our superintendent has resigned, and we need to fill that role. Obviously, that's a huge piece because that's the leader of our district, the budget maker, you know, it's a huge position. So that's one thing. Again, I don't want to be the Ayer person pushing a field project on the town of Shirley, but that's another huge factor of something that's coming down the pike for at least our high school level. We don't have fields that can accommodate spectators, and thankfully it's COVID and spectators aren't allowed, but we can't host a football game. We have no press box, there's no bleachers, the track isn't usable. So there's definitely things that need to be done to support the student athletes at Ayer Shirley. And you know, student athletes represent probably half of our population. And not only is it student athletes, it's also the marching band, it's, you know, the cheerleading, all these people that use that field, as well as gym classes and stuff like that. So to get off that soapbox, you know, that's another thing that's coming down the pike. So I would say those two things are huge because they're, you know, imminent in the sense that, you know, one's a vote and one's replacing the leader of our district.
Thanks, Michele. Joyce, what about over to you? Given your perspective on things, what are there additional key issues or additional things that you think we all should just be aware of that as we look out?
Well, you know, the school committee, we don't do hiring and firing anymore since 1993, which is very good. But we do all the financials. We approve the budgets. We're responsible for those financials. We're responsible on how that money is spent and if it's spent properly. We do all the policies of the committee, which is what the superintendent operates off of. And then the superintendent is in charge of running the school, basically. The fields have become extremely important, and probably when we built the high school, it would have been an obvious thing to add the fields onto the high school project. However, the building committee, which was only about 60 people, had felt that the price tag wouldn't allow us to do the fields at the same time because the fields weren't reimbursed at all by the state. And so it would be detrimental to getting a good high school building if we added the fields on at that time. In hindsight, maybe that was a huge mistake. Maybe we should have just gone for all or nothing. But now it's become critical that those fields be worked on. They are absolutely have fallen. It's 10 years later, and they weren't good 50 years. They weren't good before that, and they've been there for 50 years. And I think really in this day of COVID, where the students have had such pressures not to have sports at all, is huge for the pressure on the student. And we need to make that happen as fast as we can as possible. It is going to be on the May 4th. Do I have the right date, guys? On the May 4th ballot. So it's coming up real soon, and it's something that if it doesn't pass, we'll go to Plan B, I guess. But I don't think that's a very good way to do it. I think it's good that we have everybody involved as much as possible. So that's the big one. We're also doing a plan now, a 10-year plan for putting out basically everything that we think any of the schools will need in the next 10 years. So we're going to be starting on a 10-year plan. In addition to that, COVID and opening the schools and closing the schools and a few other minor things have come up this last year. So I said to people, this was not the year to be on school committee because it's been a very, very difficult year. There's a lot of things to be decided, and actually it will fall to the school committee to decide if and when the schools will be open. It's a school committee vote that does it. So I'm sure Michele can think of a few other things, but that's just kind of off the top of my head.
Great. Thanks, Joyce. Well, I want to make sure, Denim, are you with us? I want to make sure the students who have experienced and know the schools best have a chance to. Denim, what are some of the kind of issues that you and Justin want to bring to attention, and perhaps hear some thoughts from Joyce and Michele on?
Hi, I'm Denim. I no longer attend Ayer Shirley High School. I go to St. Bernard's in Fitchburg, but I'm here as like the leader of Teens for Change with Justin. But I did go there from Page Hilltop to 9th grade. So I have experienced things and seen things and staff and students, but one of our questions is, what is the policy on racially motivated comments from students or staff? And to clarify, like if someone hears racist comments or slurs in school, what will happen and how will there be a discipline?
I think let's just go back to a little bit of the structure. So the structure is that the principal of each school is in charge of that school. They present to the school committee every year their studies, plan of studies, and in that it's also a handbook that has everything outlined in the handbook as to answer the question that you just asked. So it could be a little different age appropriate, whether we're dealing in elementary school or middle school or high school. And you put me on the spot because I haven't read it recently. So I'm sure that listening to Brian Ulrich in one of the diversity equity meetings about 3 weeks ago, and I think he outlined very nicely how it would be handled by him in the middle school. So I think that's probably pretty much the approach that we have in every school, where they're looking not as a more putting people together to talk it out and not just I think you asked if it was going to be a punishment.
Yes.
So what would you suggest as a punishment? How would you handle that if you were in charge of the school?
Like some sort of discipline. I know at St. Bernard's there was a situation and right away it was shut down. There was no debating. Everyone knew about it, all the staff, and that student was had detention that day. And so I just think that personally, when I went there, there wasn't much discipline. It was kind of like, is this true? Is this not true? And there was a lot of debate about who was right and who's wrong. When obviously the person of color was called a racial slur, there wasn't really a direct, no, that's not okay. There was a lot of debate if, hey, should we talk about this or can we excuse this for today? Like there wasn't a lot of discussion. So I was just wondering, is there going to be a discussion maybe with the both of the students involved or the staff involved with the student, or detention, suspension? What would happen?
So my impression right now is that there is going to be a discussion. It will be confronted. And then like if that, let's say something was 6 years ago, right? There was different leadership in the high school. Was this high school, middle school? There were different leaderships at the time, and different people have different things. If we look at Fred Deppy in Page Hilltop, I think you would find him to be just what you described, where people would be brought together to discuss it, rather than, I mean, a detention for, you know, someone who is doing something pretty obvious, pretty nasty to someone else. Let's just say it could be anything, right? If somebody hits somebody else, what do you do?
I had a great experience with Fred Deppy, actually. I think that he was the best leader out of the whole district, personally.
Who?
I also had problems with Brian Ulrich, Roberta Akey, and a lot of the people at the high school as well. I think that we don't have a really strong leadership right now. I think that that's what we're lacking. And we all are not on the same board. We're all not in, we all need to be included. Race, sexuality, gender, everything. And we're not like that. And I can definitely see it. And now going to a brand new school where the leadership is top tier and is the best, I definitely can see where Ayer Shirley is struggling.
Another thing to intervene with what I think Joyce brought up, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like at the elementary school level, it'd be more of like a discussion compared to maybe the high school, which to an extent makes sense because I guess some of them are like 5 years old. So it's a little bit different. But I think me and Denim are talking about more middle and high school. So from what it sounds like, there isn't, it might say it in the handbook, zero tolerance policy, but from what it sounds like from you, there really isn't a zero tolerance. And it's kind of just like, well, let's talk about it. Let's maybe do something. Let's maybe not do something. Shouldn't it be a detention or a suspension? And by the way, just for anyone watching, these questions have been brought up, you know, multiple times to multiple people. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of what it sounded like.
Well, can I just jump in for 1 second?
Yeah.
We don't deal with the discipline issues. We don't hear about issues that happened in the schools. We're not privy to those things. So for us to comment on what the punishment is difficult because I don't know what the principal at the middle school would do. It doesn't get to our level, right, Joyce? I mean, it's hard for me to answer that question. It's a very specific question about what would happen in a specific instance when we don't ever get to that. Like, we're not privy to that. So you're right, there needs to be, you know, clear set, if it's in the handbook, it should be followed. I completely agree with you,
and
but
isn't that set by the school committee?
Well, we approve what's in the handbook, so we can say what's in the handbook, but we
So
get
that-
involved in the day-to-day as to how it's.
No, correct. That's what, no,
handled.
no. That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying in the
Yeah.
handbook one, as it's getting approved, couldn't a suggestion from the school committee be, hey, we really need a more of like a set guideline for this sort of instance?
So
That's kind of
Justin,
what we're
you're-
bringing to the table.
You're in high school right now, and so what does the high school handbook say currently?
It's quite vague. I'm pretty sure it actually does say zero tolerance. But like I said, it's not like if this person calls a person of color the N-word, they get a detention. I can assure you it doesn't say that. I can assure you it doesn't say if they use hate speech so many times all the time to this person, there's a suspension. I can assure you it doesn't say that. And although like I said, the school committee doesn't write the handbook. They don't deal with the day-to-day things at the school. I think what me and Denim are saying is like, that should be a strong suggestion from the school committee when those things are being written, and to really enforce the principal and the superintendent to do that, because, it's school committee, superintendent, principal.
Why don't I see if maybe we can, I want to be respectful of the time, but it's an important discussion on the table. And maybe Joyce and Michele, maybe there's sort of a kind of a frame here that you can provide of, clearly you're hearing from some perspectives from Justin and Denim about, in this case, the handbook. And if as students, they're not happy with the handbook, what kind of process might they start to advance that can help, where the school committee does have some authority or ability to better respond to some of these concerns? Is there a process or some next steps that might, come out of this?
I would suggest speaking to the principal and working with the principal in, bringing the suggestions so that when the next iteration of a collaborative effort between administration and students, I'm sure that administration would welcome some of the perspectives. And then when that's brought to the school committee, if we could have some of that student perspective along with, what's presented as part of the handbook, we would, of course, be advocating for the students and what they're looking for. I think the administration carries out what's in the handbook. So working collectively with them to come together to have something that everyone, agrees on and works together on. And then when that's brought to the school committee, it's got the endorsement of both sides, where we'd love to see that.
Also, you should, each class has a class president and other officers, and sitting down with them and going in force with basically your elected officials, to your principal, to your vice principal. In some schools, I'm not sure what goes on in ours. I think it's kind of split, but in some schools, it turns out that the vice principal is really the enforcer, and probably should go to them first. It depends how your particular school is set up, but the principal is the boss of that school. He is taking responsibility for all the kids, and it's up to him to enforce the policies of the school committee through the superintendent.
Could I interject for just a second? I just wanted to ask either Joyce or Michele if you want to just say a brief thing about the diversity, the DEI, the diversity. All of a sudden, I'm forgetting what the E stands for.
Sure. So there's several efforts that the school in district has undertaken. We've hired a director of guidance, and I'm going to misquote her title, so I'm not going to say anything more than that. But yeah.
Diversity and counseling, right?
I don't have it on the top of my head, so I don't want to misquote it. But she is also representing the school district on the diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory group. Each school has established a task force in the school to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues within that school. So there are efforts undertaken, within the buildings on each building with students and staff to address diversity, equity, and inclusion issues.
Yeah, that's also a good point. I just want to give a little feedback. I'm not on the in-school task force. I think it's also called DEI. I think they're both like the same name for the subcommittee and then also the one in the school. I'm not on it. I applied to be on it, but I have very, very, very close friends who are in it. I talk to them all the time. We talk about these things all the time. They're in Teens for Change, whatever. Just a little feedback for the school committee. It seems like they are, I think they meet like once a month or twice a month or something like that. It's very open. I've heard the conversation's great. Everyone seems to be kind of in agreement and everyone respects each other and it's like a good conversation. But I've heard from basically everyone on the committee that it's not really doing anything. It's kind of just like, hey, we have this and it looks good for a school, but like they're not really doing anything. So that's just some feedback. I know you can't fix that in a day. I just
No, but
figured I should
that's
just give
good
the
feedback. And I think the students should speak up and say, you know, we really feel like this isn't really accomplishing what we want to.
They have.
Okay.
And Mr. Christie has kind of said, okay, great, and moved on.
Okay.
I wasn't there, but I've heard firsthand from the person that it happened to that they have told me this. So I'm just giving feedback.
No, that's great. I will take that back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. Obviously, some lots of really important issues that have come up. I just want to be respectful of time because we did commit to wrapping it at the top of the hour. We can certainly continue for discussion, however that can easily be done in a big group like this. But I guess first, I just want to just closing on the schools committee part. Thank you for Joyce and Michele for your tireless work. You're confronting really important issues of the day. Justin and Denim, we really welcome your involvement and bringing the issues that matter to you and bringing awareness of these issues. And it sounds like while there's a lot of really well-intentioned efforts underway, it sounds like Justin and Denim, you've identified some things that can continually improve these efforts. I encourage you to try to channel that feedback just as you have through Michele and Joyce and through the committees in the school because it's important feedback and that's the process. So thank you for bringing that up. So with that, we're going to wrap up the kind of the formal part here. Just a round of applause to all of our volunteers for sticking with us and volunteering. So thank you. Silent claps there. And thank you to Justin and Denim more broadly for joining us, spending your evening with us, and bringing these issues as 16-year-olds. I can see you're going to be like some of us in a few years. You're going to be the ones in these positions. So catalyze the change you want to see in the world, and you know how to do it now. So with that, thank you. I'm going to hand it back to Dina to sort of wrap us up. And thanks everyone for joining with us tonight.
I just feel like the time is so short. There's so many different things we could be asking these people. But what I love about this way of doing this is that rather than going to a school committee meeting or going to a Board of Selectmen meeting where you really can't get to know the people who are doing the hard work, I feel like these kinds of forums where people can ask different questions and there's an interaction between people is really important because, as Bryan has pointed out, I mean, our town is mostly run by volunteers. I mean, we have so many people volunteering countless hours to make the town run, and in conjunction with our town administrator and other paid employees. But we really encourage the youth too to get more involved with the Shirley Democratic Town Committee. We'd like to work with you. You know, I've actually written to the Board of the Select Board to ask them if they might consider doing an anti-racism declaration. So, you know, we all work together. I think we can really make improvements in this town. And I'm one of those people that almost choiced my child out of town when things weren't going well with the school district. And wow, we have come such a long way. And it's due to the efforts of people like our panelists who are volunteering so much time to making our community stronger, to helping people work together and making us successful as a town. So I just want to thank everybody who came. Please be sure and email. You can email us at shirleydtc@yahoo.com. You can follow us on social media at DTC Shirley. This is being recorded for public access cable, so we thank Lou Carreras and Spaco for airing this so more people can see it. And I just hope you all have a great evening. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time and commitment to Shirley and Ayer.
And I think we have to thank you and Bryan very much for setting this up. And now they know, I mean, Bryan now knows what time this is. This is nothing, Bryan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And actually, just one question before closing. I mean, for Bryan and Michele and Bill and Joyce, I mean, there were some things we discussed tonight where, you know, there was some follow-up maybe. And so how does someone follow up with you? Or, you know, Bryan, we were talking about maybe, yeah, an anti-racist task force or some task force to look at it. I mean, what is the actual next step? Is it, you know, does someone email you and say, hey, Bryan, I'd like to join a meeting to talk about this? I mean, what does someone do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, staying in contact, you know, there's multiple ways of doing it, in the sense of, you know, I have a email, as all the Board of Selectmen do. It's right on the website. There's different ways on the website to contact the Board of Selectmen or any board. Also, you know, the town, if you call the town offices, they can always point you in the right direction. Though we're not in the office on a regular basis, you know, full time, we can always have a message passed along to us. And so, I mean, just reaching out in any one of those avenues, and we can either, you know, give you an update, or stay in communication, or, you know, just let you know, kind of where we are.
Great. Thank you, Bryan. Dean, I think you're muted.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. And I hope that we can do something similar to this again in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Night.